She stood in the aisle like she owned the entire plane, hands on her hips, rage burning in her eyes, voice cracking through the cabin like thunder. "This baby is ruining my flight! Get him off this plane right now!" The whole cabin froze. Passengers stared, flight attendants hesitated, and my wife clutched our newborn tighter against her chest, fear spreading across her face. But Karen didn't stop. She lunged forward, and for a split second she grabbed the baby by the arms as if she was really about to throw him off the plane. Gasps erupted, screams echoed, panic swept through the cabin. What she didn't realize, the baby she tried to snatch and throw out, was the son of the pilot of this aircraft. And that pilot, it was me. Before you hear how it all happened, comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more real HOA stories that show what happens when power goes too far. We waited so long for this moment, counting down the days, packing tiny clothes, memorizing feeding schedules, rehearsing gentle lullabies like they were magic spells. This trip was supposed to be our first taste of normal life again after sleepless nights and soft light nursery hours. My wife held our newborn close, his tiny breaths warm against her skin, his little fingers curled around the edge of her shirt, as if the world outside her arms was too big for him to face alone. We moved through the airport quietly, slow and careful like two people carrying the universe. When we boarded, first class felt less like luxury and more like safety, a quiet bubble, a place where our child could rest, where we could breathe. I wasn't wearing my uniform. I didn't need it today. Today I wasn't a figure of authority or a uniform that made people sit straighter. I was just a father trying to make sure my family's first flight together felt like a memory worth keeping. Some passengers smiled when they saw our baby wrapped in his soft blanket, his little hat too big for his head. A flight attendant leaned close, whispering how precious he looked, fingers pressed gently to her chest in that natural gesture everyone makes when they see a new life. For a moment it felt like the whole world softened to welcome him. For a moment, everything was calm. Then the energy shifted like a gust of wind forcing a door open. The sharp sound of heels on the aisle carpet, fast and impatient, like someone marching into a battle they created in their own head. She appeared, sunglasses indoors, lips pressed so tight they seemed painful, posture stiff and tall as though she had been rehearsing authority in front of a mirror for years. Karen. Her presence filled the aisle before her body did, as if attitude arrived first and she followed after it. She scanned the cabin like a queen inspecting subjects she never respected. Her eyes skimmed past everyone else until they landed on us, or rather, on the baby. Her expression twisted immediately, not with empathy or curiosity, but irritation, as if a newborn breathing softly was a crime against her comfort. Her lip curled into a shape that said she had decided something important and cruel, and we were already guilty of it. My wife adjusted her hold, gently rocking our little one even though he wasn't crying. A mother's instinct. Protection disguised as comfort. I felt her fingers tighten ever so slightly like she sensed the storm before it spoke. Karen paused beside our seats, blocking the aisle like the plane couldn't move without her permission, eyes sharp, judging, calculating whether she should strike now or save her venom for a grander moment. She didn't speak yet, but silence can be loud when someone fills it with intention. I felt her entitlement push against us like cold air seeping through a cracked window. I didn't react, not yet. I had learned long ago the power of patience, especially when someone came armed not with reason but with ego. My wife looked up at me, her eyes asking without words if everything was okay. I gave her the smallest nod, a promise in a single motion. We had traveled through harder nights and louder storms than one entitled stranger. I brushed my thumb along my son's blanket, feeling his tiny warmth through the fibers. He shifted slightly, making that soft newborn sigh that always melted us instantly, pure innocence unaware of the world's sharp corners. For a heartbeat, Karen seemed almost unsure. Maybe she expected us to flinch or apologize simply for existing. Instead, we remained still, calm, grounded in love and nothing else. And in that second, I thought maybe she would walk away. Maybe this flight would stay peaceful. Maybe the universe would be kind. But entitlement rarely retreats quietly. It waits, simmering, looking for the slightest excuse to erupt. Karen inhaled sharply, like a performer preparing for the first line of a monologue she had rehearsed all her life. And even though she hadn't spoken yet, I could feel it, the disruption, the drama, the certainty that peace had been replaced by something loud and unreasonable. Still, my son slept. Still, my wife held him like hope wrapped in cloth. And I remained calm, knowing storms pass and truth always rises, even above the clouds. For a brief moment longer, the world hung between two possibilities: a peaceful journey or the unraveling of a stranger who believed the sky belonged to her alone. And in that suspended breath of time, before the first word was spoken, before witnesses turned curious, before tension took root, I looked at my son and silently promised him something. No matter what happened next, no matter who tried to disturb the peace he was born into, no one would come between him and safety. Not on this plane, not in this life. He was ours. And I would protect him not because of authority, not because of title, but simply because I am his father. And sometimes that is the highest rank in the world. Engines rumbled softly beneath our feet, the cabin settling into that familiar hush before a journey begins. People adjusted their headrests, pulled out tablets, whispered travel plans. Flight attendants moved with practiced grace, closing bins and checking belts. Everything felt orderly, steady, normal. My son let out the faintest sound. Not even a cry, just a tiny whimper, the kind newborns make when the world shifts around them, and they aren't sure if they agree with it. A single soft complaint from a 3-week-old soul discovering air pressure. It wasn't loud. It wasn't disturbing. It was life, new and fragile and learning. But to Karen, it may as well have been a fire alarm. Her head whipped around so fast her hair snapped against her cheek, eyes widening like she'd been personally attacked by sound waves. She looked at our baby as if he were an alarm clock she could smack silent. The corners of her mouth tightened into that unmistakable look, the kind a person gets when they think existence is inconvenient unless it bends for them. "This is first class," she hissed, but loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Her voice carried that tone of someone who broadcasts grievance as currency. Some of us paid for quiet. Passengers looked up, confused. Some blinked. One man simply closed his eyes, pretending he didn't hear anything because sometimes peace means ignoring storms that aren't yours. My wife tucked our baby closer, whispering gentle shushing sounds, swaying with instinct older than language, and just like that, he calmed. A tiny exhale, tiny fingers curling back into rest. Silence returned. Problem solved. Rational world restored. Or so we believed. Karen didn't want peace. Peace doesn't feed anger. Peace doesn't give her audience. She pressed the call button like she was detonating something, finger slamming down once, twice, 3 times for effect. It echoed through the cabin. Not the sound itself, but the intention behind it. A challenge, a demand, a declaration that she would not allow life to exist without her permission. A young flight attendant approached with polite professionalism, smile soft, voice gentle. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" "No, it is not okay," Karen snapped, each word sharp enough to cut through courtesy. "That baby is going to scream this entire flight. Remove them." "I want them off the plane." The attendant blinked, stunned. "Ma'am, the baby isn't crying." "For now," Karen spat, eyes wide like she'd discovered a national threat strapped into seat 2A. "Do I look like someone who tolerates crying?" She didn't wait for the obvious answer. I paid for silence. I expect silence. My wife's breathing hitched. Her shoulders stiffened, arms wrapping around our son protectively. She wasn't loud. She didn't argue. She just held our child like the world had suddenly tilted. She whispered apologies even though she did nothing wrong. That's the thing about good people. They apologize for existing when confronted by those who think the world owes them comfort. I felt my jaw tighten. The instinct to stand, to confront, to protect, surged like a wave rising too fast. But I stayed still for a moment, not out of weakness, but control. Sometimes power isn't in reaction. It's in choosing when reaction matters most. I watched. I listened. My wife stroked our baby's hair, her eyes glistening with that quiet ache only new mothers know, the fear that someone might take your peace away just because they can. The attendant tried again, voice softer. "Ma'am, there's no disruption. If he cries, we'll assist. Right now, everything is okay." Karen scoffed, loud, exaggerated, a performance. "You clearly don't understand what first-class passengers expect." Murmurs spread across the cabin. A couple shook their heads. Someone muttered, "It's a baby, not a chainsaw." Another whispered, "Some people shouldn't leave their houses." But no one spoke loud enough for Karen to hear clearly. Not yet. People avoid conflict until it comes too close. Karen leaned closer to the aisle, eyes locked on my wife, voice icy. You should have booked economy. Where crying things belong. That sentence didn't explode. It seeped like poison, creeping, burning, settling in the hearts of everyone who had ever been bullied by someone with a false sense of superiority. My wife's eyes lowered, lashes trembling, a tear forming but not falling. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself, clutching our baby like she was protecting the promise of better days. I reached over and placed my hand on hers, not to calm her, but to remind her she wasn't alone, not here, not ever. She didn't speak, she didn't break. She just squeezed back, a silent language between parents who'd already survived the hardest nights. Karen looked satisfied for a moment, believing she had triumphed simply by raising her voice. Some people mistake silence for victory. They don't realize silence sometimes belongs to the storm gathering strength before it strikes. Without knowing it, she had already crossed a line, one she couldn't walk back over, not because of noise, not because of comfort, but because she touched something sacred, a child and the woman who brought him into the world. And she believed she could control that world with volume alone. She didn't know who sat just 2 seats away, holding everything that mattered in his arms. She didn't know what power really looked like. Quiet, composed, steady. She didn't know yet that titles don't sit in uniforms. They sit in resolve. And she had no idea she was about to challenge the wrong family, on the wrong plane, at the wrong moment in time. The cabin door clicked shut, sealing us inside a world suspended between earth and sky, where strangers breathed the same recycled air and obeyed the same unspoken rules. Be patient, be kind, let time carry you forward. Safety announcements began, attendants demonstrating calm motions that always felt like choreography meant to reassure even the most anxious traveler. My wife adjusted the baby's blanket, kissed the top of his head, and whispered something soft only a mother could know how to say. For a moment, everything was quiet, a rare moment in life when silence feels earned. Then, a tiny protest broke it, the softest newborn cry, barely a whimper, like he was remembering he existed and needed comfort to anchor him again. Just one sound, just one breath of emotion, tiny and fragile and innocent. To anyone with a heart, it was nothing, just a baby saying he was here. To Karen, it was a declaration of war. Her head snapped back again, but this time there was no slow glare, no dramatic sigh. She moved with purpose, the kind that comes from someone convinced they are the enforcer of rules no one else agreed to. She unbuckled her belt, stood with authority she imagined she possessed, and turned toward us like a missile locked on target. My wife felt her presence before she even arrived. Motherhood gives women an instinct that precedes threat. She tightened her grip, cradling our son closer, whispering a gentle rhythm meant to soothe him the second his cry began. The baby calmed instantly, like he trusted her breath more than the air around him. It didn't matter. Karen had already decided. I warned you, she hissed, footsteps quick and determined down the aisle. I will not tolerate this. Before either of us could speak, before reason or diplomacy or decency could step forward, Karen's hand reached out like a claw. She didn't simply point or gesture or threaten. She grabbed. Her fingers caught the edge of the blanket, tugging it with entitlement that shocked everyone within reach. Gasps burst around us like breaking glass. A woman behind us clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. A man 3 rows back half rose from his seat, unsure if he should intervene or watch in disbelief. Another muttered, "Is she insane?" My wife reacted instinctively, not with fear, but with the kind of strength only a mother discovering she is protecting her entire world can summon. She pulled the baby back to her chest, turning her body away, shielding our child with her arms and her heartbeat, whispering, It's okay, even though her voice trembled with shock. Karen didn't relent. "Hand him over," she barked, yanking again, confusion and fury battling on her face as if she couldn't understand why a mother wouldn't surrender her newborn on command. "You don't get to ruin my flight. I paid for peace. Peace does not submit to selfishness. Peace does not bow to arrogance. And peace does not hand a child to a stranger." Passengers erupted, whispers rising into sharp breaths, disbelieving outrage spreading like fire catching dry leaves. Someone said, "Stop her." Someone else stood halfway up, unsure if chaos allowed heroes yet. A flight attendant froze mid-aisle, tray shaking in her hands, forced between customer service and human morality. My chair shifted slightly as I began to rise, not like a blast or eruption, but a force building upward from stillness, the silent answer to a threat that had crossed a sacred line. There are moments life separates itself into before and after, and this was one, a line not bent or smudged but severed completely. Karen still clung to the blanket edge like she had a right to it, like she had authority over someone else's child. The absurdity of her conviction twisted her features into a mask of righteousness gone rotten. She genuinely believed she was enforcing order, saving the world from a 2-second baby whimper. She didn't see my wife's silent tears forming, not from weakness, but adrenaline and disbelief and fierce resolve. She didn't see my son's peaceful blink returning in his mother's arms. She didn't see the rising tide in the cabin, silent strangers turning into witnesses ready to become defenders. She didn't see me yet, but she would. In that suspended moment, before my hand reached hers, before her voice cracked with the shock of realizing she had misjudged the entire universe she was standing in, there was one truth floating in the charged air between us. Some people break rules. Some break patience. But only fools try to break the bond between a parent and their child. She thought she had power because she had volume. She thought she had authority because she had audacity. She thought she had control because no one had stopped her yet. She mistook silence for permission. She mistook calm for fear. She mistook mere passengers for spectators. She had no idea the world she just stepped into. My wife held our child tighter, breath trembling but steady, heart pounding but unbroken. I rose slowly, every muscle calm, every step deliberate, not fueled by rage but by purpose. Real power doesn't lunge, it stands. She had grabbed a blanket. She had touched the space of innocence and love. She had crossed the one boundary that turns ordinary people into immovable forces, and she did it all without knowing who sat just inches away, watching, calculating, deciding. She thought she was in control. She had no idea the pilot wasn't in the cockpit yet. He was standing right behind her. I rose slowly, not with anger that flares and burns out, but with the steady certainty of a storm that knows it cannot be stopped. My movement alone shifted the air, a quiet authority pushing against the chaos Karen had created. Her hand still clung to the edge of the blanket like she believed force granted ownership, like stubborn fingers could overpower love or logic, or the very basic human instinct that protects the smallest among us. My wife held our son close, her breath shallow but steady, every part of her saying no without needing volume to prove it. Karen didn't see me stand. She was too consumed by her mission, too blinded by the fantasy that she could command the world into her shape. She tugged again, voice breaking louder than the baby ever had. "Give him to me. I'm helping. This is for everyone's peace." The irony dripped thicker than the tension in the cabin. Peace wasn't her goal. Control was. It always had been. Passengers stared in disbelief, some gripping armrests, others frozen halfway out of their seats like they wanted to intervene but were held by shock. The flight attendant hovered, torn between protocol and morality, her lips parted but no words forming. Humanity often pauses before deciding whether to become witness or participant. But there are moments when hesitation ends, not because bravery suddenly appears, but because the situation demands clarity. And this was that moment. I reached out and placed my hand around Karen's wrist. Not harsh, not jerking, but absolute. My grip didn't shout. It spoke in finality. That single touch stopped her movement, like she had collided with a wall she never realized existed. Her body stiffened instantly, as if electricity had run through her. Her fingers loosened on instinct, the blanket slipped free. My wife pulled our child in tighter, turning slightly away, the protective arc of her arms a shield stronger than any law. Karen froze, breath hitched, shoulders tense like she'd been caught in a crime she hadn't yet accepted she committed. Slowly, she turned her head. Her eyes climbed from my hand to my arm, then to my face. Her expression shifted as she processed what she saw. Not a frightened father cowering beneath her outrage, but calm steel, rooted strength, a man who did not need to raise his voice to end an argument. Who do you think you are?" she said, voice suddenly small beneath the bravado she'd worn like armor a moment earlier. She expected compliance. She always had. She expected apology, retreat, weakness. She had no framework for what stood before her now. I leaned slightly closer, not to intimidate, but to ensure clarity. There are statements that cannot be yelled. They must be delivered quietly, not because they lack power, but because they carry too much of it. The man you should never have touched a child in front of. The words were not a threat, they were a fact. Unshakable, unarguable. She blinked, her breath stuttered. Confusion tangled with fear as her confidence began to crumble. I was trying to... The excuses scrambled for footing, tripping over each other. Her righteousness evaporated under the reality of consequence. Authority borrowed from self-importance collapses fast when confronted by real authority. Without hurry, I reached into my pocket. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just deliberate. A motion so steady it demanded attention without asking for it. When my credentials appeared in my hand, the passengers leaning forward could see enough to understand. The gold accents, the name, the airline emblem, the badge of responsibility and training and command. Karen's eyes widened, pupils shrinking as recognition hit. Her voice thinned into disbelief. Your crew? She whispered, as if the word itself shifted gravity. Then her voice cracked a little more. You're the pilot? I didn't blink. I didn't need to. Truth has its own posture. I am. And the baby you just tried to remove from this aircraft is my son. The cabin inhaled collectively. Silence spread, not charged now, but cleansing. Karen's defiance drained from her shoulders like melted wax. Her jaw trembled, mascara clinging to her lashes in a way that made her eyes look desperate, cornered not by force but by reality. For the first time, she seemed aware of her size in the world, small, loud, mistaken. She tried to form a new defense, but words dissolved halfway to her tongue. I didn't know, I thought. There it was, the fragile admission that her outrage came not from principle but impulse. She didn't care about rules, she cared about dominance. And now she stood exposed, stripped of the illusion she carried so proudly down the aisle. Passengers watched her, not with anger now, but judgment. Some with sympathy, not for her, but for what ego does to a person when it grows unchecked. The flight attendant stepped forward, emboldened by clarity, posture straightening as she shifted from uncertainty to duty. Karen's breath quickened, the first sprinkle of panic flickering across her face. She had lived her life assuming consequences were for other people. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. All I said was, sit down. Not a threat, a command issued by someone who was not asking permission to protect his family or his plane. She flinched at the tone, the realization that the world she tried to control now moved without her. Slowly, mechanically, like a puppet whose strings had been cut but still remembered the motions, she backed up and lowered herself into her seat. Her hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale, breathing uneven. My wife looked at me then, relief softening her eyes, gratitude trembling in her lashes. I brushed the top of our baby's blanket gently, his tiny face peaceful again, blissfully unaware that moments earlier someone had tried to rewrite his world. He slept safely because we held the line between chaos and comfort. Karen stared forward, trapped now not by force, but by truth, and the plane hummed around us again, returning to quiet order, but shaped forever by what had just happened. The moment a woman's imagined authority collided with real responsibility, the moment entitlement hit reality and folded. The quiet after confrontation always feels heavier than the noise itself, like the air is holding its breath to see what comes next. Karen sat rigid in her seat, eyes wide, lips pressed tight as though holding in the panic she had never expected to feel. The woman who stormed down the aisle moments ago believing she controlled the cabin now looked like she was trying to shrink into the fabric of her seat, as if invisibility could undo what had been done. But actions cast shadows long after voices go quiet. The flight attendant approached, her posture changed. No confusion now, no hesitation. Calm professionalism sharpened with authority. Her eyes flicked to me briefly, a question answered silently in the nod I gave. Then she leaned slightly toward Karen, voice soft but steady, polite but unyielding. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay seated. The captain has been informed. Security will meet us at the gate. Karen's jaw dropped slightly, eyes jerking around as if searching for someone to back her version of the universe. Security? For what? I didn't do anything wrong. Her voice sounded smaller now, thin as paper trying to hold up bricks. Panic didn't suit her, authority had been her costume, and without it she looked like someone suddenly unsure how to breathe. You endangered a passenger, the attendant replied. No judgment, just fact. Nothing to debate. Karen opened her mouth again, but the words tangled and fell apart before they could form. She had marched into a fight believing volume was power. But now volume didn't matter. Intent did. Consequence did. Around her, people shifted in their seats, not aggressively, not hostile, but unified in the silent agreement that what she had done crossed every line. One passenger, an older woman with a kind face and silver hair, leaned slightly forward and shook her head at Karen, not with anger but disappointment, like a teacher watching a student realize the test they bragged about acing wasn't multiple choice but essay, and they had never learned to write. Karen swallowed hard, throat bobbing as she tried to rebuild her defenses. I was protecting everyone. Babies shouldn't be. I was doing the right thing. But her voice cracked at the end, betraying her. She looked toward the other passengers, seeking validation, finding none. People who moments earlier ignored the world around them now watched her with a quiet, unmoving certainty. She had misjudged the room. She had misjudged humanity. The plane rolled toward the runway exit, the hum beneath our feet smooth and steady, the world outside framed by sunset through oval windows. My son slept, peaceful, unaware of the drama that had unraveled his world for a moment. My wife kissed the top of his head, her breathing calm again, though her hands still rested protectively against his back. Some instincts linger not because they haven't calmed, but because they refuse to forget so quickly. Karen twisted in her seat, hands gripping the armrests as if holding on could anchor her to control she no longer possessed. This is ridiculous, she whispered, voice trembling. I pay for comfort. I pay for silence. You don't pay for people, someone murmured across the aisle, soft, firm, true. A few nods followed. No applause, no cheering, just a quiet ripple of agreement, community without ceremony. Karen turned forward again, chest rising and falling like she had run a marathon in her mind. She stared straight ahead, staring at nothing, waiting not for permission to speak, but for reality to come for her. There is a certain dignity in accepting consequence. She had not found it yet, but the moment hovered close. The wheels touched ground, the light bump rattling through the cabin like punctuation. Engines hummed lower. A voice came over the intercom, the practiced tone carrying calm that had never wavered. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Please remain seated as security will be boarding the aircraft. Karen's fingers fidgeted, tapping frantic Morse code against the armrest, her breath shallow. Her eyes darted again, looking for exit, or alley, or miracle. None appeared. She tried one last strategy. Outrage turned into fragile plea. This can't be happening. I didn't mean, I just wanted, I didn't know. She finally spoke the truth without realizing it. She didn't know. She didn't know the world wasn't built to orbit her comfort. She didn't know people protect what matters, not what complains loudest. She didn't know a mother's arms carry strength steel can't imitate. She didn't know silence doesn't always surrender. And she didn't know the man sitting a seat away wasn't just a father. He was the one responsible for every life on that plane, including the one she tried to rip from safety. Footsteps echoed up the jet bridge before the door even opened. Uniforms entered. Calm voices greeted the crew. The aircraft door slid open with a soft hiss, and security stepped on board with the casual assurance of people who have practiced peace through structure, not noise. They walked with quiet confidence, the kind Karen had never understood. Ma'am, one officer said simply, please come with us. Karen blinked rapidly, face twisting as if searching for a version of reality that made this unreal. I didn't hurt anyone. Her voice wobbled. I didn't throw him. I only tried to. Her own sentence betrayed her. Tried. Intent was enough. Danger isn't measured by success, it's measured by attempt. The officer's voice remained steady. Ma'am, please stand. Karen rose slowly, movements jerky, dignity slipping like sand through fingers. She looked around once more, searching for sympathy and finding only stillness. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second, and something unspoken crossed her face. Recognition not of me, but of truth. The truth that she had believed she held authority until she collided with a world that didn't bend for her. She walked forward stiffly, escorted out of the cabin. No one clapped. No one mocked. Real justice doesn't need applause, it needs acceptance. The door closed behind her with a soft but final thud, like a chapter ending not with drama but certainty. Peace returned to the cabin, fragile at first, then steady as passengers exhaled. My wife looked at our baby again, brushing his cheek gently, breathing in relief like fresh air after turbulence. The world outside the window was still. The sky still wide, life still moving. One moment of chaos dissolved into calm, one voice silenced by responsibility, one act of ego undone by truth, and the hum of the engines began again, preparing not for conflict but for flight. The engines hummed softly, a gentle vibration beneath us as if the aircraft itself exhaled now that the storm inside had passed. Passengers settled again, shifting back into their lives, their conversations, their thoughts. The chaos felt distant, like a wave that had crashed and retreated, leaving only quiet foam on the sand. My wife ran her fingers through our baby's tiny hair, whispering comfort the way only mothers can. That instinctive language without words, gentle and ancient. He rested against her chest, small breaths returning to steady rhythm, safe in the only world he had ever known. Her arms. No one spoke loudly now. Respect hung in the air, heavier than fear had, calm settling like sunlight filtering through clouds after rain. A passenger leaned forward, offering a soft smile and a quiet "he's beautiful," as if their voice might disturb the peace we were rebuilding. Another handed my wife a tissue, not for tears now, but as a gesture of shared humanity, the kind strangers offer each other when the world reminds them how fragile and fierce love can be. People apologized for Karen, though they didn't have to. They shook their heads, murmured about entitlement and kindness and how compassion should travel first class, too. Someone whispered, "I've never seen a mother protect like that." They meant it as praise. But the truth was simpler. Every mother would, if the world dared test her like that. Strength lives in quiet hearts until a reason wakes it. The cabin lights dimmed as we took off again, soft glows replacing harsh reality, the sky outside blending orange into violet into deepening blue. The world below shrank into patterns of light and dark, cities reduced to sparks, roads to threads. Up here, everything looked smaller, problems looked distant, life felt bigger than one person's demands or anger. The ceiling of the world stretched above us, limitless and calm. My wife leaned her head against mine, exhaustion soft but content. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The gravity of the moment had settled into us, not as weight, but as warmth. Survival of chaos always feels like waking from a nightmare into soft light, the relief quieter than the fear was loud. I kissed her forehead, then brushed my thumb over our son's blanket, grounding myself in the miracle that was breathing against her. Small, helpless, powerful enough to bring us to our knees in love and to steel us in defense. Hours later, wheels touched the runway with a gentle thud, the city lights outside blinking like stars that fell to earth. The captain announced arrival. Seatbelt chimes echoed. People stood, stretching limbs, collecting bags, adjusting jackets, reclaiming pieces of normal life. A flight attendant approached us privately, her expression sincere, gratitude and respect blending in her eyes. "We're so glad your family is safe," she said softly. My wife nodded, a silent thank you. Sometimes words aren't big enough for relief. When the door opened, 2 airline security officers stood waiting just beyond the jet bridge. They didn't approach us. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was confirmation. Justice had already begun its quiet procession. Karen was nowhere in sight. Quiet consequences move that way, without spectacle, without shouting, without the need for audience. The crew informed us privately she had been escorted off, her behavior documented, her actions forwarded to authorities. The system had taken the wheel now. There would be follow-through. There would be accountability. We left the plane slowly, not because we were hesitant, but because you walk slower when you are carrying something precious. The airport felt different on the way out. Not overwhelming, not frantic, just quietly alive, like we were stepping into a world that had shown its worst and its best in the same breath. People held doors for us. Someone smiled at the baby. A janitor paused to wave, small kindnesses layered over the memory of confrontation like soft blankets covering sharp edges. By the time we got home, the world outside was asleep. Streetlights glowed like patient guardians, the night a hush that asked for gentle footsteps. Inside, the air felt warm, familiar, forgiving. The nursery light glowed low, welcoming us into a space built from hope long before fear tried to intrude. My wife settled into the rocking chair. swaying slowly, humming lullabies to a baby already drifting into dreams. I stood by the crib for a moment, staring at the tiny mattress where he would sleep, the small stuffed bear waiting beside the pillow. Innocence doesn't know danger until the world introduces it. But tonight, innocence returned untouched. That mattered more than anything else could. When I lifted him from her arms and laid him gently into the crib, his arms stretched once, a tiny sigh escaping his lips like he was releasing the day already. I tucked the blanket around him, smoothing out the folds, making sure he was warm, safe, complete in his peaceful world. I leaned down, kissed his forehead, and whispered a vow that wasn't new but now lived louder in my heart. As long as I breathe, I murmured, quiet enough for only him to hear, no one touches you without going through me first. The room felt still, sacred, lined not with anger but with promise. My wife touched my shoulder, her fingers soft but sure, her smile tired but strong. Protection isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It moves in truth, not noise. It rises when needed and settles when peace returns. Outside, planes crossed the sky, tiny lights gliding through darkness, carrying thousands of lives quietly. The sky didn't belong to anger. It belonged to calm, and in that calm, our sun slept, untouched by the storm, untouched by the noise, untouched by the world's temporary cruelty. Tomorrow would come, life would move. But tonight there was only safety, only breath, only the sacred quiet after standing firm against chaos. And as I watched him sleep, I understood something simple and vast. The world will always make noise. It will always test boundaries. It will always have people who believe volume equals power. But strength doesn't shout, love doesn't surrender, and a parent who knows their purpose is louder than fear, louder than anger, louder than entitlement, even in silence, especially in silence.